Excuse me. You can't deny a mandatory HOA inspection. I demand access, shrieked Gloria Affinity, HOA president and full-time boundary invader. She stood mid-tantrum at the foot of my gravel driveway, flanked by two uneasy HOA volunteers, when my wife Sarah calmly held up her badge. Actually, Sarah said, pulling out a thin manila folder, you're the one trespassing on federal property, and if you'd like to talk, you'll need a warrant. She flipped it open. Gloria's face drained of color. There it was, her own name, printed neatly atop an unsealed federal warrant. I'm Elliot Grange, a quiet engineer with a weakness for cold brew and Norwegian crime novels. My sanctuary was a cozy, self-built cabin nestled deep in the forested edge of Foxglove Summit, a so-called rustic community run by an overzealous HOA. I kept to myself, paid dues on time, and installed a composting toilet without incident. But that piece seemed to invite the wrong kind of attention. Gloria Affinity, our HOA president, spiritual descendant of Nurse Ratched, and the woman who once fined a man for hanging wind chimes in an emotionally aggressive manner, had found her next obsession: cabin inspections. Mine was next on her clipboard, supposedly part of a quarterly rustic compliance initiative. I declined. She cited bylaws. I told her to leave. Gloria countered by hiking up the ridge with binoculars and a digital thermometer, claiming it was for safety. Then came the emails. We're concerned about mold. Some residents reported smoke smells. Do you house bees? What Gloria didn't realize was that Sarah, my wife, wasn't just a calm woman who baked sourdough and kept succulents alive. She worked for the U.S. Marshals Service, and she didn't take kindly to bullies hiding behind fake authority and printed codes like magic spells. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning. Gloria marched up my driveway holding what looked like an official property assessment form, with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. Elliot, we need to discuss your cabin's compliance status. I was sipping coffee on my porch, watching two cardinals fight over birdseed, enjoying the kind of peace that makes rural life worth it. What compliance status? She pulled out a laminated card that looked suspiciously homemade. I'm authorized under Section 12-4 of the Community Guidelines to conduct structural assessments. I'd read those guidelines cover to cover when I bought the property. Section 12-4 was about pool maintenance. Gloria, that's about chlorine levels. She huffed, offended. Well, it's been updated. Her audacity was almost impressive. 2 days later, she returned with backup, a jittery man named Dennis and a clipboard-wielding woman who looked like she regretted every decision leading to this moment. Elliot, we've received multiple complaints about your cabin, Gloria announced. I was replacing a loose board on my deck, the kind of normal maintenance that apparently qualified as suspicious activity in Gloria's world. What complaints? I asked. Dennis cleared his throat. Well, there have been reports of unusual sounds. Unusual sounds? Gloria cut in. Hammering at odd hours. Loud music. Possible illegal construction. The hammering was me fixing the deck they were standing on. The loud music was Norwegian folk songs played at normal volume. The illegal construction was a bird feeder I'd hung last month. But Gloria wasn't done. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures like she was documenting a crime scene. Is this structure permitted? She asked, pointing at my perfectly legal, professionally inspected cabin. Yes, Gloria. I showed you the permits last year. She ignored me and kept snapping. And this composting toilet. Are you sure it meets county standards? It was installed by a licensed contractor and passed 3 separate inspections, I said. She scribbled on her clipboard. We'll need to verify that. The woman with her whispered something to Dennis, who nodded nervously. I was starting to understand why the previous HOA president had fled to Florida. Things escalated when Gloria expanded her investigation beyond my property. She started questioning my neighbors about suspicious activity from my cabin. Mrs. Patterson, who lived across the trail, told me Gloria had knocked on her door asking about strange smells and fire hazards. Those smells were my morning coffee and the occasional grilled cheese sandwich. The fire hazards were presumably my fireplace, which I used exactly as intended, for warmth and ambiance. Then came the night visit. I was reading in my living room when I heard footsteps on the porch. Through the window, I saw Gloria with a flashlight peering through my curtains. When I opened the door, she jumped back like a guilty teenager. "Oh, Elliot, I was just checking for carbon monoxide leaks," she stammered. She was holding what looked suspiciously like a TV remote. "Gloria, it's 9:30 at night." She squared her shoulders. "Emergency inspections can happen any time under the new safety protocols." I frowned. "What protocols?" She waved her fake device. "The ones approved at the last emergency board meeting." There hadn't been an emergency board meeting. I knew that. I actually read the minutes. The breaking point came when Gloria enlisted her adult son, Trevor, to help with what she called enhanced surveillance. Trevor, who looked like he'd rather be gaming, set up a folding chair at the edge of my property and sat there for hours with binoculars. When I asked what he was doing, he muttered, "Monitoring compliance activities." "And that means?" I asked. He shrugged. "Mom says I need to watch for code violations." I looked at this 20-something kid watching my cabin like it might suddenly sprout illegal extensions. "Trevor," I said, "what code violations?" He pulled out a laminated sheet and read aloud, "Unauthorized modifications, improper waste disposal, and—" He squinted. "Excessive bird attraction." I stared at him. I'd put up one bird feeder. Apparently, that qualified as excessive. When Gloria showed up unannounced the following week, clipboard in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, Sarah met her at the base of the driveway. This time, Gloria hadn't come alone. She'd brought Dennis, the clipboard woman, and 2 new recruits I didn't recognize. It looked less like an inspection and more like a low-budget invasion. "Elliot, we need immediate access to conduct the mandatory safety inspection," Gloria barked. Sarah stepped forward, still in her marshal's office work clothes. "Ma'am, do you have a warrant?" Gloria's laugh was sharp and self-assured. "This is my jurisdiction. I don't need a warrant." That's when Sarah turned and walked inside. A moment later, she came back with a slim file folder she'd been holding onto for weeks. You see, Sarah doesn't just work for the U.S. Marshals Service. She's very, very good at it. And when someone like Gloria starts throwing fake authority around to make people miserable, Sarah notices. Months earlier, she'd run Gloria's name through the system, just out of curiosity. What she found was enlightening. 3 years ago, Gloria had used her HOA title to create a fake business license in a nearby county. She'd pretended to be a government official to help someone skip proper licensing procedures. Sarah had quietly forwarded that to a federal task force for identity fraud. And just this week, that case came back active, with an open federal warrant for impersonating a government official. The federal government takes that sort of thing very seriously. Using fake authority to sidestep legal processes isn't just unethical, it's a felony. And Gloria had done it in writing, with signatures and counterfeit letterheads she designed herself. Sarah had copies of everything: the forged documents, the phony seals, even emails where Gloria proudly signed off as county licensing coordinator. It was the kind of airtight evidence that makes prosecutors grin. The change in Gloria was instant and spectacular. She went from self-righteous HOA tyrant to stammering suburban mom in about 3 seconds flat. That's not. I was helping the community," she blurted, voice cracking on community. Sarah remained calm, professional, every bit the seasoned marshal. "Ma'am, you represented yourself as a county official to approve a contractor's license. That's a federal crime." Gloria's volunteers began inching backward like she'd just announced she was contagious. Dennis looked like he might faint. "I was just trying to help Bob start his landscaping business," Gloria offered weakly. Sarah held up her phone. "By falsifying government documents to do it?" The bolt cutters slipped from Gloria's hand, clattering onto the gravel like a punctuation mark to her downfall. But Gloria wasn't done yet. She tried one last pivot. "This is harassment. You're abusing your position to intimidate a volunteer." Sarah smiled faintly. "Ma'am, I'm off duty. This is a citizen's arrest, based on an active federal warrant." She showed Gloria the paperwork. "You have the right to remain silent." Gloria's face cycled through colors, red, white, and a pale, nauseous green. You can't arrest me! I'm the HOA president. Sarah was already on the radio calling for backup. That's not a real position of authority, ma'am. And even if it were, federal law outranks HOA bylaws. The next 20 minutes were surreal. Gloria alternated between demanding to speak to Sarah's supervisor and insisting it was all a misunderstanding. I never said I was a county official. But Sarah had the proof. In this email, she read, you signed as Gloria Affinity, County Licensing Coordinator. That's not a real title, and you don't work for the county. Gloria tried another angle. I was just streamlining the process. Sarah shook her head. You created fake credentials and charged someone $300 to process a license application you had no authority to handle. $300. Gloria had been running a side hustle using her HOA title to convince people she had government clearance. When the sheriff arrived, Gloria made one last desperate attempt. This is about my cabin inspections. She's retaliating because I found violations. The sheriff, a patient man named Deputy Collins, looked at the warrant, then at Gloria. Ma'am, this is for events from 3 years ago. Has nothing to do with any cabin. Gloria opened and closed her mouth like a stranded fish. But Collins was already reaching for his cuffs. Ma'am, you need to come with me. That's when Gloria completely unraveled. This is unconstitutional. I demand a lawyer. I demand to speak to the real authorities. Sarah, who quite literally was the real authority, just watched as Gloria was guided into the back of the patrol car. Gloria continued to protest, claiming deep fakes, framing, and government conspiracies. But Sarah had body cam footage, time-stamped photos, and even a witness statement from a former HOA treasurer who now ran a dog-walking business called Snitch and Fetch. By the time the sheriff drove away, Gloria was still screaming about constitutional overreach and deep-state compost toilets. I stood on my porch, sipping coffee, watching 3 years of petty tyranny finally catch up with her. At the next HOA meeting, live-streamed, by popular demand, I gave a short presentation titled Boundaries, Warrants, and Why You Leave Married Men's Cabins Alone. Sarah sat beside me, calmly knitting a scarf that read, BYOB, I bring your own badge. Gloria's resignation was immediate and tearful. The new HOA president introduced one simple rule. If the property has no smoke, bees, or bodies, leave it be. The room erupted in applause. Gloria pleaded down to community service and 2 years probation. Ironically, she was assigned to clear the trail overgrowth behind my cabin. Sarah occasionally waved from the porch. The woman who'd spent 3 years trying to inspect my composting toilet was now picking up literal garbage within sight of it. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The first day she saw Sarah, Gloria turned so red I thought she might faint. This is humiliating, she muttered to her supervisor. Sarah just smiled, tightened her yarn, and went back to her knitting.